What were your takeaways after rewatching the Oregon tape?
Yeah, number one, we got to start faster. I think, again, you have a game of data, right? And then you have the games before that as data. And you always look, the first thing I always do on the day after the game is what could I have done better? All right. And goes back to your process, goes back to, how you game plan, what you did in practice, how'd you execute that in practice, how were they with the game plan? Did you do too much? Did you do too little? You always look at those things, right? So that's the first thing you evaluate. You fix it from there. Then you look for, the execution part in terms of, with the players and, they're ready and they're hungry, for their next opportunity to respond. But you look at that, we got to start faster. We got to be more consistent. Again, we have to be obsessed about the process. I get it. We want to be obsessed about the football. We are obsessed about the football. It's the process of getting that football, and that's all the little things that we talk about. So we got to continue to be consistent with those, obsessed with the process, and keep responding like we always do.
Fleck and Kingsbury, I've talked about how you guys maybe just pressing a little bit defensively, almost trying to get the football too much, knowing that how valuable it is. How do you try and fix that as a defensive coordinator?
Yeah, you just go back to, like I just said, it's about the process of getting that ball, right? It's not just a magic, we're not going to have a magical drill, that we have that's, now we're going to have 3 takeaways a game, right? I mean, you see Northwestern, their defense was kind of the same way. And then the last game, bam, they have 5 takeaways. Sometimes takeaways come in bunches. You do obsess about it, but you got to obsess about the process. And you can't chase plays. And, we can't get into that in terms of guys chasing plays or, I'm attempting to make the perfect call. Like, there is no perfect call. We got to go and obsess about the process and respond from there.
Northwestern does a good job of getting good angles in the run game and executing their combinations. What have you noticed about that element of their team?
Yeah, they're a team that wants to run the football, and this would be a classic Big Ten game. In terms of running the football, their offensive line is extremely talented in terms of they play really hard together. They're good at those stretch plays, some of the stretch pullers plays that they do as well to get the ball on the perimeter, even the crack stuff where you got to crack replace. So they're really sound in terms of that. They know their identity of what they want to do, and that's what obviously makes it a challenge too, because then they're really good at what they do, right? So it will be a challenge for us up front in terms of defeating blocks and using our hands, striking our hands, having low pad level, and playing hard at the line of scrimmage.
Griffin Wilde's got at least twice as many targets as any other Northwestern receiver, so is knowing where he is on the field at all times just a crucial part of the game plan?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you're playing a guy that has the ability to take the top off the defense or a guy that has the ability to be a threat on, first, second down, third down, you always got to know where that guy is at all times. They do a really good job at putting them in all different positions. Sometimes he's at number 1 of the field, sometimes in the slot, sometimes into the boundary. They hide him with motions and things like that where you always got to keep your eyes kind of on him in terms of where he's aligned and, certain, tips and tendencies based off of that stuff. But he's a very dynamic player, very, very good at catching the football, possessing the football, going up and getting it. But they're surrounded by good players. I mean, their running backs, 5 and 6 are solid Big Ten running backs. And, when you have that and you're attempting to stop the run, now you're able for the play action pass game and, the downfield shot games and things like that. So they do a really good job mixing it up.
You're a Chicago guy. What does it mean to go play at Wrigley?
Yeah, it's going to be really fun. I grew up, on the south side of Chicago, so I was a Sox fan, growing up, a White Sox fan. But, it will be really special going back. A lot of family coming to the game, a lot of friends, people that, I've been friends with for, since I was 5 years old, coming to the game and, in packs. So it will be really fun, getting home and getting around those people and, just being able to have our product out and, hopefully give them a good show.
Any concerns at all with footing on a baseball field?
Yeah, we're proactive in this program, right? So, we talked about that, early in the summer and talked about that in training camp even. Brady, our equipment manager, does a great job by giving the guys the options of, what sort of cleats they want to wear, especially on defense. We started, our defensive meeting of the week of, hey, guys, here are your options for this. We're playing on grass for the first time this season. So, especially the footing, maybe it's, going to rain on Thursday or Friday, and that's going to affect the field a little bit. So we're proactive with that. We have a plan with that, and looking forward to attack that plan.
Specifically from the Oregon game with the pass defense, what were the biggest issues there?
Yeah, again, I mean, there's a handful, in terms of every play is different. Every play is its own entity, right? But collectively, our eyes have to be in the right spot. That's the first thing. I think early in that game, there's a lot of eye violations there, and when you have eye violations, then there's certain guys that get cut loose at that time, or not really cut loose, but then there's open seam windows, and not as good, obviously, when you have elite eyes. So that I think at times we're a little bit too aggressive on those play actions, and first drive they slip us right away there, and the guy has a catch down the sideline there. But again, there's a collection of things. I got to do a way better job, obviously, coaching it, because those things showed up. Again, when negative things happen, the first thing I do is what could I have done better, and what could the staff do better, and that's what we're attempting to fix, and we're looking forward to the challenge of fixing it.
Kingsbury was talking about having fun playing in the defense, just all the different things that he can do. What have you noticed in the progression of him, just in how you deploy him, being able to move him to the edge and play off both?
Yeah, he's a fun guy to work with, because he's a guy that he's a true football player, and he loves football. And you can line him up in different places, and he's a violent and physical player. And when you have a violent, physical player that loves football, you blitz him, right? You have him play true linebacker where he's able to read things, but we have him on the line of scrimmage at times. He's at linebacker depth at times. He's blitzing. He's dropping into coverage. You kind of never know what he's going to do, and that's what makes him really special, is because there's never really a key on what he's going to do pre-snap. So, but it's just been fun being able to get in those different fronts, especially on third down, and deploy them from there. And they love it. They enjoy it. Of all those guys, we talk about the mudita of every guy having joy for somebody else's success. He's just like that. Right? Like, everyone's excited when he makes a big time play, especially on third down, but then he's super excited for everybody else when they make plays, right? And that's what we got to keep having with this defense. That's what makes this defense special.
Anything else for Coach Collins? All right, thanks, Coach.
All right, thanks, guys.
Watch the Oregon tape with the entire offense. What was the message to them?
First thing is we got to start fast, and that was the thing that I showed them. Was the first drive of the game, we had a false start. We had an MA on the second play of the game. And then third down, I think we gave up the sack. And then the second half, we came out and we went right down the field. I can't remember the exact number of plays in the drive, but we went right down the field. And I just want them to understand, like, you can do that to start the game. It's just execution. We didn't execute on the first drive of the game. We executed in the first half, or the second half, the first drive of that half. And I think that was it. I talked about, too, with the guys, of making the available play and making the big play. And I look at that game, where going into that game, Oregon had 16 possessions inside the 10-yard line against them. We had the opportunity to have 3. Jamison makes that catch right there, and we have first and goal on the 3. That's our second drive of the game, I think, maybe third. And we're first and goal on the 3, and with an opportunity to make the game 14-7. In those types of games, you have to make those types of plays. And that's what I talked about the guys with. It comes down to that. It's executing and then making the available play and making the big play when your number's called.
If the run game's going to get going against Northwestern, what are going to be the keys against that defense?
Trusting our eyes, executing, playing fast. It's the same thing each week. Having Darius back is obviously a very good thing. Feme keeps coming along. We just got to continue to be physical. We did a lot of nice things in that Oregon game. I think they're number 3 defense in the country. Toledo's number 2. Ohio State's number 1. We also played Ohio State this year. 44% on third down. O-line did a lot of good things in that football game that allowed us. I think it was our second highest third down conversion rate this season. I think in the Ohio State game we were poor on third down. Iowa, we were average. And then Oregon, that was the highest third down conversion percentage they've had on anybody all year, including Indiana, I believe. And so I think, like, when you look at that, like, I can look at all the negatives, or I can look at the positives of how we played, how we executed, how the quarterback handled the adversity in the game. 4 NFL D linemen up front. Quarterback handled it pretty well. So I think, like, I can look at it that way, and I can look at all the negatives of We missed a block here. We have to communicate better. I can do that, but at the end of the day, the guys went out and played hard, and they executed the game plan from an offensive perspective. 4 possessions into the game, we scored twice. First half, that was what it was. We had a 2-minute drive at the end. Second half, first drive of the second half, went down and scored. So, I want our guys to continue to execute, play fast, understand the why, and understand how we're executing the game plan. Go from there.
Northwestern's defense thrives when they win on first down because then they're able to get into the too high and Tampa 2 type of looks, which makes it tougher to get explosives. First down efficiency is always important. But
Correct.
How much is it magnified in a matchup like this?
I mean, we got to stay on schedule. You know, they're a tough defense. Like, their D-line is they're thick, they're physical, they're stout. Tim McGargle does over the years, you just seen those linebackers. He was a linebackers coach, then he was a defensive coordinator. I worked with him in 2015. A lot of the guys worked with him in 2015 at Western Michigan, and he does a fantastic job of getting those guys to play very hard. That's the first thing you look at that team is they play very hard, and then they're very sound. Their D linemen are going to be in their gaps. And like I said, they're very stout, and they're tough and physical, and they're tough to move. Linebackers are very disciplined. In the back end, a 6 is as good a safety as we've seen, especially in the run game. You have to account for him with that, and I think that's one of the things schematically we have to do a good job of is understanding where he is. He's one of those guys you have to game plan, and then staying on schedule. Like I said to start, is first and second down. You stay on schedule there. It puts you in a manageable third down, which is kind of what we did in the last game. We had, I think, 3 short yardage opportunities against Oregon. We have to do that again against Northwestern in order to stay on the field, sustain drives, and score points.
Understand you're a Cubs fan. What's it mean playing in Wrigley to you?
Oh, it's cool. I think my first game was back in high school. My dad took me. It was Braves Cubs. It was the final regular season game of the year. They were bad. They were bad those years when I was growing up. And then it's really been cool to see them, transform the culture, transform their program, and then obviously win the World Series. But it's going to be cool. I've been to 6 or 7 games there in my time. I mean, obviously we have a number of Chicago guys on staff. Callie and I are always talking about the Cubs all summer. Coach Kaler's a big Cubs fan too. It's pretty fun. And a lot of guys went to the Cubs Twins game when they came this summer. So it'll be fun. Kind of one of those things where you don't really realize it. And when the game's kicked off, you got to kind of move on. But it'll be kind of nostalgic and fun to be in there and see it.
Where have you seen Drake come along the most here?
He's grown in so many areas of his game. To pinpoint one thing that he's done better than another, it's hard right now in game 11. But if I had to say one thing, I've just loved his poise throughout the entire season. And we had a conversation on the bye week just about that 6-game stretch and how much of a challenge that was and how much he learned over those 6 games and what he didn't know what he learned at the end of it. Like, if you asked him at the beginning of that 6-game stretch if he felt the way he was going to feel at the end of it mentally, not physically. Physically, every team in the country doesn't feel great physically. It's the mental aspect of when he started that and then 6 different defenses with multiple defenses in there that are extremely, extremely challenging to prepare for. It's just his process and his poise week to week of managing that, and I've loved you don't want any ups and downs. Like, you want everything to constantly be going like that, but the line of success, as we know, goes up and down. And with him, it's been great to see him battle through a bad game, battle through a poor half, finish the Michigan State game the way he did, finish the Purdue game the way he did. Those types of things I've loved to see, because Michigan State, he'll tell you too, we struggled at quarterback in that game. And then when it mattered the most, he came through for his teammates, and he came through for the offense. And then the guys around him played really, really well. And I think that's what I've seen the most out of him is just his poise, his will to win, how he's doing everything. He'll continue to get better as a quarterback. I love to see that. But it's all those intangibles that people don't necessarily see that I think he's really striving in and excelling in.
You're able to scheme up some targets for Darius in the passing game. What does having him back do just for the route combinations, not just design-wise, but in the check down?
Yeah, I've loved having him back because his skill set, and I said to him, like, 12 months ago, he looks dramatically different than he did 12 months ago, and the things we're asking him to do. Was working with him on Sunday on a few things, just things that I want to continue to develop him in, whether it's in the pass game or the run game. We were off to the side working on some things, and I mean, just the twitch and explosion that he has that he didn't have 12 months ago, even in spring ball. He's just constantly working on his body, and I know it's been frustrating for him, but he's constantly worked on that nonstop in the training room and with our trainers, and it's been cool to see. But the scheme piece of it, you can use him in a number of different ways. We can screen him. We motioned him out of the backfield, put him into routes. We're continuing to work with him on, run game blocking rules, things like that, where he's just – I don't call him a running back. I call him an all-purpose back. And he can do a number of different things protection-wise. Like, you want to get him out of the game so he can get a rest every once in a while, but, like, you love to have him in there in six-man pro too, because he's so intelligent and understanding – what the pressures look like that teams give us. And then when he does know and he executes, like, the physicality that he plays with, that's how he played. Like, we watched the one play as an offense. It was third. I think it was the first time we were in the screen twice to him. But, I mean, guys were bouncing off of him, and you get him the ball in space and you allow him to play fast, he can be very, very special. And the crazy thing is he still has room to grow. He's never going to stop growing. That's what's exciting about it.
The offensive line's going to rebound after the Oregon game here going into Northwestern. What are the key points?
Again, playing fast, executing, being physical first and foremost. And I want to see him play well just like you do, And so I think, again, when I look at the short yardage, I'll go back to that game. The short yardage that we were in, we were 2 for 2 in 3rd and 1s. I believe against Rutgers we were 0 for 2. And that was a big thing. Again, this season's a process, and we have 10 games of data, and I have to do a really good job of understanding what they can do well and how they can execute. But at the end of the day, they got to play physical, trust their technique and preparation, play fast.
What have you noticed in the progression of Javon Tracy just as he's kind of acclimated to learning the system and getting more reps?
With him, I've really been on him just from a practice standpoint, because understanding how hard you have to practice and how much you have to execute in practice to be able to turn those practice reps into game-like reps in practice, and then they turn into game reps. And that's a hard thing to do for any player. And that's what I think is really, really good about him, really, really good about a lot of our players, is once you learn that, you start to see him have success. Michigan State, I think he had the team high in catches. He did a really nice job on a few things in that game. Did a really nice job in the Michigan State game on even in the run game. He's starting to play faster in the run game and understanding, when do I need to go block that safety? Maybe it's an alley player that I got to be able to handle, and I got to include him in my count. And then I look at the Oregon game. He only had the one catch, but that was really, really nice play because he played fast. He used the rub on the route coming across, and he ended up catching a nice ball that was a little bit behind him. And that's what I think he does a really good job of with Drake, is picking him up when he has a bad throw, things like that. I've been excited about his development and how he's coming along, and along with a lot of the other guys in the room. But Javon's continuing to change his best and continuing to get better each day.
One more if anyone's got it? Nope.
Thanks,
All
Greg.
Thanks.
Coach.